Welcome back to how I use Photoshop to draft patterns. In the previous videos I demonstrated the process I go through when drafting a block and the Photoshop tools I use to do all the drawing. Remember, a block is not a garment design. Rather, it is a representation of a region of the body through a series of shapes drafted from measurements. The more shapes involved often determines the sophistication of how a future garment will contour to the undulations of the body, to its hills and valleys, and, on top of this, blocks are also often modified to make them suitable for different levels of fit, from loose to close to skin tight. In my case, the modification was through negative ease grading, where side edges were squeezed in to make circumference measurements smaller, and so any garment to be derived from it required to be made from a stretch material like latex. Now the block itself can become a garment without any further work done to it, other than pattern conversion, where seam allowances etc. are added. After all, if you want a garment to fully cover the body, such as a catsuit, then the blocks that would be involved in the design are already fully covering the necessary regions: arms, neck, upper torso, lower torso and legs. But that is not what I am going to use my block for. In fact, at the start of this video, I don't really know what I am going to design. I have no predetermined garment in mind. I'm just going to work organically and see what happens. Maybe it will be a vest, a crop top, a waistcoat, a bra, who knows? So let's find out. So as I have been rambling on, I have applied some labels to my block just to indicate the bust and waist lines and what each shape section is. Okay, this next part is very important. All the lines so far drawn no longer should be touched. They are set in place and should not be further adjusted unless at some point in the future the person the block represents gains or loses weight. That is, that their measurements change. By making no further modifications to what we have drawn, this means we always have the block available to us at any point in the future that we want to make some garment. We don't have to draw the whole thing again. Instead, we simply work from copies of it, and that is what I shall be doing. So I make a copy of the folder containing the original natural measurement shapes, and they are all that I shall be touching. Now, while I have said that I haven't got a clue what kind of garment is going to materialize here, other than it being skin tight, I do know what thickness of latex I want to make my garment from, so I am first going to play around a little with the sides of each shape, utilizing the graded reductions. I plan to use a 0.5mm thickness of rubber. Now I could simply use the 8% reduced block for this, but instead I'm going to relax the fit just a little at the bust line to ease up on the flattening effect upon the breasts of the rubber when it is stretched. So here I will adjust things to the 6% reduced block, and I am going to tighten the fit more at the waistline by using the 12% reduced block. However, at the waist, we have to ensure that each pair of edges of each dart, as they come down from the bust line, are the same length. So using the ruler tool, I measure from the 6% reduction to the 12% one and divide this by 2. So at the waistline, one side of the dart is brought in by this half amount, and same on the opposite side. We can play around with the graded reductions as much as we please, making considerations regarding the level of compression for our skin type fit, and we can go back later and change our mind if we feel we need to. Okay, from here on in, it is time to start exploring. Well, firstly, because I am not including a sleeve, I am going to adjust the depth of the armhole level by dropping points 10 and 11 to around halfway to the bust level. This act tends to improve the fit of the armhole. I am also going to make the neck opening lower and wider by dropping points 0 and 3 and bringing in shoulder points 13 and 15. Like I said, I don't know what garment will emerge from all this, but playing around with the neck opening is a start. I am next going to play around with the height of the bottom edge by raising the waistline. Again, I am just exploring at this stage. Rather than make adjustments to the bottom edge, I drag down a guideline to mark the new level. I have opted for around 8 cm below the bust, which for this person will approximately be around the underbust level. And I draw a series of lines along this level. The start and end points of these lines have manipulation guides, which I have set to be square, that is at right angles to each other. This allows me to align the vertical axis manipulation guides to the side edges of the blocks, which results in the horizontal axis manipulation guides being reorientated to a different angle that sees the lines bow upwards. Making sure that our bottom edges are squared to the side edges in this way is important. I now adjust the waist points by bringing them to the newly drawn lines. The bottom edges are not going to be perfect, but they will suffice for the time being. Next up, I am stimulated by what I have so far done to move the bust dart. Remember in a previous video how we moved it from the inside shoulder to the mid shoulder? Well, this time I want to move it to the armhole. So I draw a curve that starts vertically at bust point 12 and which ends at no particular angle at the armhole. I am just looking to produce a nice looking curve. I make a copy of the side front section and rasterize it. Right click on the layer in the layers window and choose rasterize layer from the drop down menu. I return back to my curve, select one of its ends using the direct selection tool, pick up the end using the pen tool and then click around the outside of the section. Then choose a fill color. This shape is then rasterized. Using the quick selection tool, I drag my mouse through the shape until a shimmering line appears around it. Then I reselect the side front layer, then on the canvas right click and select Layer via Cut. The shape that was drawn can now be deleted. Taking the upper segment, I drag it across to point 12, move the center point to 12 and then pivot the segment until the shoulder points meet or come close to meeting. Alternatively, we can align the shoulders together at 23A and pivot from this location until things meet or come close to meeting at point 12. I now redraw my front section, adjusting its corner points. All I am looking to make sure here is that the shoulder line is straight and that my dart edges start vertically at 12. I next redraw the side front lower section to basically remove the upper segment area we cut away. The side front segments can now be deleted. I next bring the side front section to the front one by aligning them together at the armhole. All I am checking here and adjusting for is that the curve of the armhole is nice and smooth across the two sections. I am now going to repeat this entire process for the back dart, moving it from the mid shoulder to the armhole. However, I am going to do it slightly differently. This time, instead of producing a cut segment from the side back section, which is then pivoted and joined to the back, after drawing the curve, I make a copy of the side back section and adjust them both to produce the two back section parts. The upper part is then pivoted into position to the back section and the back section redrawn. Okay, so at this stage I began to be more stimulated to produce a kind of halter neck that would convert the shoulder regions into straps that go around the back of the neck. To do this, I first made a copy of the back section and then aligned the back shoulder to the front one. I then overlapped the shoulders by just over 1 centimeter. When we produce straps, we are making the rubber more narrow in width. The more narrow and strappy rubber becomes, the easier it is to stretch. So while we do not normally apply reduction to vertical measurements, because this either compresses things like the spine, forcing us to stoop, or it forces hemlines, such as at the wrists of sleeves, simply to be pulled up higher on the arm, There are times when we can apply some reduction, such as here in the case of straps over the shoulders. This tightens the fit and helps with such things as supporting the breasts. I next draw some new lines for the design I am after, orientating a strap from the armhole to a little lower down the back from the neck, and from the chest to a little higher up the back of the neck. Next, I slide over the back sections so that they make contact with each other, and then slide these over to the side front until they make contact. I then continue my design by bringing the armhole curve over to the back edge at the bust level. In other words, I am removing all the upper region of the back. With the design in place, I next make adjustments to my sections. While I might have undone all that hard work of having changed the location of the back dart, this is often something we accept when working organically rather than to some predetermined design. Okay, so my garment design has kind of spontaneously appeared just by moving a handful of lines, which at each turn has stimulated me to play around a little more until the design revealed itself. I've ended up with a kind of halter neck crop top. I have a suspicion, however, that if I leave things as they are, then on wearing the design the prominence of the breast will likely push forward the bottom edge and reveal underboob. This might be cool, but instead I am going to add a little extra volume into the breast region. To do this, I am going to add an extra centimetre in height. I bring guidelines down to 1/2 centimetre above the bust line and 1/2 centimetre below it, that extra 1 centimetre I am after. I make a copy of the side front section and rasterize it. On the side front, I make a cut using the polygonal lasso tool. This just involves me clicking from some random point on the armhole to bust point 12, and then around the outside edge of the upper region until returning to my original location. Right-click and choose Layer via Cut. With the Move tool, I then pivot the cut segment on the armhole until the bust point touches the upper guideline. I then pivot the lower segment on the armhole point until its bust point touches the lower guideline. I next make a copy of the front section and rasterize it. This time I use the rectangular marquee tool, dragging a box around the outlines of the lower region up to the bust line, and then electing Layer via Cut. Both the lower and upper segments are pivoted on point 6 until their bust points touch the guidelines. The copied sections are then redrawn and the cut segments deleted. And that is it. That is as far as I am going to go with this design. So join me next time for the last video where I will convert the design into a finished pattern that can be used to make the garment.